Hello, and welcome to another Precision Flyer Repairs video. This one's about a 1948 American Flyer 350 Royal Blue 462 Pacific. It was sent to me from a customer. It's his father's engine, and he wanted it made to run like it should. And I think it turned out terrific, and I wanted to share that with you. I also wanted to give you a little background on the American Flyer 350 Royal Blues. They were pretty much extensions of American Flyer 3-rail O-gauge trains that were pre-war, in that there's a lot of similarity to it, of course, now being after 1946. It's on their 3/16th scale product line with 2-rail track. And the 350 was produced in 1948, and it came with the wire or silver handrails that you see this one has, one set going from the boiler down to the pilot and another set along the sides of the boiler. In 1950, they re-released the Royal Blue, and it has cast-in handrails, so it lost the separately applied detail of the wire handrails from the 1948 version, which is what this is. So that's one clear spotting difference between the two 1948 1950 350s. I also thought I'd spend a little time on brush bracket assemblies and armatures, because this was about during the time 48 to 50. Things changed a little bit in terms of that, and yet remained the same at the same time. And I'll clear up that confusion. The brush bracket assembly that I'm talking about is this piece. This is the piece at the end of a American Flyer steam engine motor, and it holds the brushes which contact the commutator, and it has that shiny brass ring in the middle and armature bushing in it for that end of the armature. So it would sit in this engine like that, and the armature would extend into it, and the brushes slip in, and springs and end caps then to hold the brushes and brush springs in place. Now this is part number XA9565A, and the interesting thing here is, before 1949 and during a good portion of 1949, there was this piece produced, and then beyond 1949, using the same part number, XA9565-A, it was changed slightly, and the part number, though, did not change. What they did was, after October 1949, they moved the placement of this rear armature bearing 1/16 of an inch further away from the armature than it was previous to October 1949. And the reason for that is, from 1946 to October 1949, armatures for these motors were built like this. You can see the wide gaps between the coil segments, and you can see there's a flush face on the commutators. When you look at its profile, there's no oil slinger, and I'll point that out in the next ones. So these just have a flat face and no oil slinger and wide gaps between the segments. This one happens to have a broken wire in one of its segments. That's why it's in my core parts box. So from 46 to 49, you had the wide segment gaps, you had no oil slinger, and you had a brush bracket assembly with the part number XA9565-A, and the rear armature bearing closer to the commutators than after 1949, October 1949. After October 1949 through March 1951, they made that same armature, only they added an oil slinger to it. And when they added the oil slinger to it, they made that brush bracket assembly move the rear bearing of or bushing for the armature a 1/16 of an inch away from the commutators. Now, I don't have an example of the armatures used from October 1949 to March 1951, but I can tell you they still had the wide segment gaps, but they did have added to them an oil slinger. And an oil slinger looks like this. You can see it shiny there. It's to take oil that might come in from the shaft being oiled by the oil wick and sling it away from the commutators rather than allowing it to seep any further closer to the commutators down the shaft and sling out on the commutators. You don't want oil on your commutators. Now, this armature happens to be one that was made from the end of March 51 to late 1957. And that's when they started to pull more. And you'll see here that it's got gaps that are much more narrow than before. So from 46 to October 49, they made them this way. Oh, I'm sorry, that was the wrong armature. Hold on, that'll come up next. From 1946 to October 1949, they made them this way. Large gaps, no oil slinger on the commutator face. And they had a brush bracket assembly with its rear armature bushing located accordingly. Then from October 1949 to March 1951, they made them the same way as they had, but they added the oil slinger, which is evident here. Then from the end of March 1951 until late 1957, they made them just like this one shown here, with the tight gaps between the coil segments and an oil slinger. And at that point, with an oil slinger starting in late 1949, they relocated this back armature bushing a 1/16 of an inch further away from the armature to accommodate for the oil slinger. And that then remained the XA9565-A, even with, and here's the part that I showed at the wrong time, even with the large 3/4 inch winding armatures, which this is an example of. There's the oil slinger. So from March 1951, or the end of March 1951, all the way through late 1957, while they were still using these flat commutator motors, they used an XA9565-A brush bracket assembly with its rear armature bushing located a 1/16 of an inch further away from the commutators than the earliest armatures that were made that did not have an oil slinger. And so what can be very confusing is the brush bracket assembly part number did not change, but its design and that one dimension of it did change with the dawning of the oil slinger armature. So there's a little background on that. This was released in 48, so it didn't have an oil slinger, and it has the XA9565-A that it should. And then after October 1949, they did go to the oil slinger, still the wide gap, but the oil slinger. And so you'll find engines manufactured in the calendar year 1950, in the last couple months of 1949, starting then to have a slightly different brush bracket assembly that's got the rear armature bushing 1/16 further away from the commutators. And accordingly, when they went to the oil slinger, they made the armature shaft 1/16 of an inch longer as well. So it's really important to match armatures with brush bracket assemblies through the production years of American Flyer S gauge, 1946 to late 1957. All right, well, hopefully that gave you some insights to this and maybe cleared up some confusion on the flat commutator armature type brush bracket assembly, part number XA9565-A. And now I just wanted to say thanks so much for watching my videos. And if you like them, I would ask that you please subscribe to my channel and click all so that you get notified anytime I post a new one. Also, if you'd like to know more about Precision Flyer Repair Services, please go to my website at precisionflyerrepairs.com or drop me a line through precisionflyerrepairs@gmail.com. And on my website, you can also contact me through the contact page there. So let's see this one in action. They're a lot of fun. There's no choo-choo, there's no smoke, there is a headlight, and they do reverse. So it's relatively early in flyer development, and as I mentioned, kind of a carryover from their pre-war train O-gauge 3-rail days. And let's see this one in action now. She's a good, steady operator. I put it with a freight train because one of the 350 sets sold actually was a freight set, even though the real Baltimore and Ohio Royal Blue was run as a passenger service train. I think it's kind of fun to put it in either service. This is running along at about 13 volts on the railhead, and it can get up and go pretty well. I might stretch its legs a little bit this time around. There she goes. Yeah, people who say 350s don't run well, I don't think have them in very good tune yet. And it reverses well too. It did have its reverse unit rebuilt. And off she goes to deliver the fast freight consumers or businesses are waiting for. So there you have it. A 1948 American Flyer Royal Blue 462 Pacific steam engine. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, be well and have fun running your trains.